The Hall of Subjugation was the largest room ever built by any species in the known galaxy. Its ceiling stretched so high that clouds sometimes formed beneath it. From that ceiling hung 400 banners, each one torn from the homeworld of a conquered civilization. Some were thousands of years old. Some still had bloodstains on them. Archon Zelith Vor sat upon his throne at the center of this hall, and he was bored. He was a towering figure nearly 7 feet tall, covered in dark living chitin that served as both skin and armor. His 4 eyes, 2 golden, 2 black, scanned the council members seated below him. They were arguing again. They were always arguing, but today, at least, the argument was about something mildly interesting. A new species had been discovered at the edge of the galaxy. "They call themselves humans," said Intelligence Director Kathais, projecting a holographic image into the center of the chamber. The image showed a creature that made several council members laugh out loud. It was soft. It had no armor, no claws worth mentioning, no venom glands, no psionic ability. It stood on 2 legs and had dull, forward-facing eyes. Its skin could be cut with a sharp stone. "This is a joke," muttered War Marshal Sirath Kale from his seat near the front. He was the commander of the Onyx Talon, the most feared fighting force in 12,000 years of Korvathi history. He had personally overseen the destruction of 30 civilizations. He looked at the image of the human the way a predator looks at an insect. "They have been spacefaring for approximately 300 years, Kathais continued. They possess no natural weapons of note. Their bodies are fragile. They cannot regenerate. They cannot see in the dark. By every biological metric, they rank in the lower third of known sentient species." Another round of laughter from the council. "However," Kathais said, and something in his tone made the laughter fade, "they have refused the Dominion's offer." Silence fell across the hall. The Dominion's offer was simple. It had been the same for 12,000 years. Every new species received it: submit and serve or be destroyed. No species had refused in over 2,000 years. The last one that did had been burned from existence so completely that not even their name survived. "Refused," Archon Zelith Vor leaned forward on his throne. His voice was low and smooth, like stones grinding together deep underground. "What exactly did they say?" Kathais hesitated. He pulled up the transmission log. The human ambassador, a female with short dark hair and a calm expression, appeared on the display. She had received the Dominion's ultimatum, read it carefully, and then looked directly into the recording device. She had smiled. "Come and take it," she had said, nothing more. The hall erupted. Council members shouted over each other. Some demanded an immediate fleet deployment. Others laughed at the absurdity of it. A soft-skinned, clawless, short-lived species daring to challenge an empire that had ruled the galaxy since before their ancestors crawled out of whatever ocean spawned them. Zelith Vor raised one hand, and the hall went quiet. "War Marshal Kale," he said, "your assessment." Sirath Kale stood. He was nearly as tall as the Archon, built like a siege engine, with cybernetic enhancements visible along his arms and spine. His eyes glowed faintly with psionic energy. He had been gene-forged before birth, trained since he could walk, and enhanced beyond what nature ever intended. He was, by any reasonable measure, one of the deadliest beings alive. "They are insects," Kale said flatly. "Sending a war fleet would be wasteful. Allow me to deploy the Onyx Talon, 500 warriors. We will crush them, claim their worlds, and return before the next moon cycle. It will be good exercise for the newer recruits." The council murmured in approval. The Onyx Talon had never failed a mission, not once in 6,000 years. Every member was gene-forged, cybernetically enhanced, and psychically linked to their brothers and sisters in arms. Each one had a kill count that would horrify most species. They had toppled empires alone. Zelith Vor nodded. "Granted, make it quick." As the council began to disperse, a small voice called out from the back of the hall. "Please, if I may speak." Every head turned. Standing near the entrance, barely tall enough to see over the railing, was Ambassador Ireli of the Pelori. She was a small, bird-like creature with iridescent feathers and large, nervous eyes. The Pelori were a vassal species, conquered centuries ago, now serving the Dominion as scouts and translators. They were harmless. Nobody paid attention to them. "Speak," Zelith Vor said, more out of amusement than interest. Ireli stepped forward, her taloned feet clicking on the marble floor. She was trembling, but she spoke clearly. "Supreme Archon, my people have observed the humans from the outer rim for several decades. We have studied their transmissions, their history, their culture." She paused. "I believe the Council is making a grave error." Laughter rippled through the hall. Kale crossed his arms and stared down at her with open contempt. Ireli pressed on. "The humans have a history unlike any species in our records. They have fought wars against each other for their entire existence. Not border disputes or resource conflicts, total wars. Wars of annihilation. They developed weapons capable of destroying their own planet and then chose not to use them. Not because they lacked the will, but because they wanted their enemies to live in fear of what they might do." She projected a series of images: burning cities, mushroom clouds, soldiers charging into certain death with nothing but determination on their faces. "They have a concept," Ireli continued, "that my people cannot fully translate. The closest word in our language would be something like purposeful defiance or refusal to yield even when logic demands it. In their language, they call it spite." She looked directly at the Archon. "They will not surrender, Supreme Archon, not because they believe they can win, but because surrender is something their species finds more unacceptable than death." The hall was quiet for a moment. Then Zelith Vor waved his hand dismissively. "Thank you, Ambassador. Your concern is noted and ignored. They are apes with starships. The Onyx Talon will remind them of their place." Ireli lowered her head and stepped back. She had done what she could. 3 days later, 5 black warships broke orbit above Valithor Prime and jumped to hyperspace. Inside the lead vessel, War Marshal Sirath Kale stood on the bridge, sharpening a blade made from the bones of a conquered king. Around him, 500 of the deadliest warriors in the galaxy prepared for what they all believed would be the easiest mission of their careers. None of them knew that they were flying toward their graves. Far away, on a frozen moon at the edge of human space, a woman named Colonel Marin Voss received a priority transmission. She read it twice, set it down, and looked out the window at the endless ice. Then she smiled, the same kind of smile the human ambassador had given. "Finally," she said quietly, "tell the Wolvers to wake up, we have company coming." The Acheron system was the kind of place that made even hardened soldiers uncomfortable. It sat at the very edge of human-controlled space, 7 dead planets orbiting a dying orange star. There was nothing here worth fighting over, nothing worth living for. That was exactly why humanity had chosen it. Acheron 7 was the smallest moon of the system's gas giant. It was a frozen rock wrapped in permanent blizzards, with temperatures that could kill an unprotected human in 4 minutes. Beneath its ice crust lay a vast underground ocean of liquid, so cold it moved like oil. The winds on the surface could strip paint from metal. It was, by every reasonable standard, a terrible place to build anything. Colonel Marin Voss had built a fortress here. She stood now in the command center buried 200 meters below the ice, watching her tactical display as 5 black shapes dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of the system. She was a woman of 53 years, lean and hard, with a face that carried the scars of 3 colonial wars and eyes that had seen things she never spoke about. She did not raise her voice. She did not need to. "Confirm contacts," she said. 5 vessels, Colonel, Corvathi design, Onyx Talon configuration. The communications officer's voice was steady, but his hands were not. Voss nodded. "Time to planetfall. 11 hours at current approach speed." 11 hours, more than enough. She activated the base-wide channel. Her voice carried through every corridor, every barracks, every tunnel and gun position on and beneath the frozen surface of Acheron 7. All hands, this is Colonel Voss. Protocol Thermopylae is now active. You know what that means. You know what you signed up for. Every one of you volunteered to be here. Every one of you knew this day would come. She paused. The Korvathi are sending their best. Let's show them what that word actually means. Voss out. She turned to her command staff. Get me Mbewe and Ashcroft. We have work to do. Sergeant First Class Darrow Mbewe arrived first. He was a large man with hands like shovels and a mind that thought exclusively in terms of explosions, pressure plates, and structural weak points. He had once collapsed an entire enemy bunker complex using nothing but mining charges and a stolen fuel line. Military intelligence had classified 3 of his trap designs as restricted weapons. Sergeant, Voss said, how long to activate the full tunnel network? Mbewe grinned. Already started, Colonel. My team has been wiring this moon for 6 years. Every tunnel, every choke point, every access shaft. I can collapse any section on command. I can bury them, drown them, freeze them, or cook them. Just tell me which. All of the above, Voss said, at different times. Dr. Lena Ashcroft arrived next. She was thin, pale, and looked like she had not slept in 3 days, which was true. She was the base's chief science officer and the leading human expert on Korvathi biology and technology. She had spent 5 years studying captured Korvathi equipment, and she understood their warriors better than anyone alive. The Onyx Talon are extraordinary, Ashcroft began without greeting. She pulled up biological schematics on the display. Each warrior is gene-forged for speed, strength, and durability. Their chitin armor can stop standard rifle rounds. They see across multiple light spectrums. They are faster than any human by a factor of 3, and they can operate in extreme environments. She looked around the room. They are also connected through a psionic lattice network, a psychic link that allows them to share thoughts, coordinate movements, and react as a single organism. In open battle, they are essentially unbeatable. So we don't fight them in open battle, Voss said. Exactly, Ashcroft smiled for the first time. The lattice is their greatest strength, but it is also a weakness. Disrupt it and they lose their coordination. Each warrior becomes an individual, still dangerous but confused, alone. They have never fought alone. They do not know how. She held up a small black device. We have built EMP psionic scramblers, 47 of them, placed throughout the base and tunnel network. On my command, we can turn their greatest advantage into their greatest vulnerability. Voss studied the display. How many are they sending down? Scans show half their force preparing drop pods, 250 warriors. They are sending half, Voss said quietly. They think half is more than enough for us. Nobody in the room laughed. They all understood what that meant. The Korvathi saw this as a training exercise, a warm-up. They expected to walk through the front door and find frightened animals waiting to surrender. They would find something very different. Over the next 11 hours, Acheron 7 transformed. The 2,000 soldiers of the garrison, every single one a volunteer, every single one aware they might not survive, worked with quiet, focused intensity. Firing lines were calculated to the millimeter. Corridors were narrowed with blast walls to negate the Korvathi speed advantage. Atmospheric processors were rigged to flood entire sections with toxic gas or supercooled vapor. False walls hid gun positions. Dead ends became kill boxes. The entire base became a maze designed to do one thing: slow the enemy down and bleed them dry. On the surface, Mbewe's engineering teams finished their masterpiece. The ice fields around the base were hollowed out from below, turned into thin crusts over deep chasms filled with sharpened metal stakes and frozen acid pools. Pressure sensors were hidden beneath the snow. Every landing zone that looked safe was anything but. The Wolvers, the 77th Asymmetric Warfare Battalion, made their own preparations. They were the base's Special Forces unit. 63 men and women who had been selected for one quality above all others. They did not quit. Their commanding officer, a quiet woman named Captain Neela Osai, gathered them in their barracks and said only 6 words. Make them remember this place forever. And then the waiting was over. The black drop pods fell from orbit like seeds of death, punching through the atmosphere and slamming into the ice fields around the base. 250 Onyx Talon warriors emerged into the howling blizzard. They moved in perfect formation, their psionic lattice humming with shared awareness. Each warrior could feel every other warrior's position, thoughts, and intentions. They moved as one mind in 250 bodies. War Marshal Sireth Kale led from the front. He stepped onto the ice of Acheron 7 and scanned the landscape with his 4 enhanced eyes. He saw a frozen wasteland, a small, ugly base half buried in ice, no defensive positions, no army waiting to meet him, no resistance at all. He almost laughed. Forward, he commanded through the lattice. Secure the base. Kill anyone who resists. Capture their leader alive. I want to see the fear in a human's eyes before the end. His forward squad, 20 of the finest warriors, advanced across the ice field toward the base entrance. The ground held for exactly 12 steps. Then it collapsed. The entire ice field in front of the base cracked and fell inward, swallowing all 20 warriors into a chasm 30 meters deep. The walls were lined with metal stakes. The bottom was filled with a chemical mixture that burned through chitin armor like fire through paper. Screams, real screams, from warriors who had never screamed in their lives, echoed up from the darkness. Kale froze. He reached out through the psionic lattice to contact his forward squad. He heard nothing, only static, only silence. Far away, deep in the tunnels, Dr. Ashcroft pressed the activation switch on the first wave of psionic scramblers and whispered, "Welcome to Acheron." Above the base, cutting through the blizzard like a wound in the sky, a single red flare rose into the darkness. Kale stared at it. He did not know what it meant, but somewhere deep in a part of his brain that had been engineered to feel nothing, something cold and unfamiliar stirred. It felt like the beginning of doubt. The first 12 hours of the battle for Acheron 7 went exactly the way the Onyx Talon expected. They were faster, they were stronger. Their chitin armor turned aside bullets that would have killed any other creature. Their enhanced eyes saw through the darkness of the tunnels. Their blades cut through human body armor like it was cloth. In those first 12 hours, they killed over 300 human soldiers. Sireth Kale received the reports through what remained of his psionic lattice. The signal was weak, disrupted by something the humans had built, but it still functioned in short bursts. 300 enemy killed, minimal Korvathi losses. The base was being taken, corridor by corridor, level by level. Everything was going according to plan. And then it stopped going according to plan. The first sign was the doors. The Onyx Talon would clear a corridor, push forward, and the heavy blast doors behind them would slam shut and lock. Not just lock, weld themselves closed from the other side. Suddenly, the warriors could not retreat. They could only go forward, deeper into the base, through corridors that grew narrower and narrower until their speed advantage meant nothing. The second sign was the replacements. When an Onyx Talon warrior killed a squad of human soldiers, another squad appeared within minutes. Not reinforcements from some hidden reserve, the same kind of soldiers, in the same positions, using new tactics adapted to what had just happened. Whatever trick worked once never worked twice. The humans learned in real time in the middle of combat while people were dying around them. Kale had never encountered anything like it. In Sector 7 of the underground tunnel network, an Onyx Talon strike team of 15 warriors pursued a retreating human squad into what appeared to be a storage area. The humans ran inside and the Korvathi followed, moving to surround them. The moment the last warrior crossed the threshold, the humans ducked through a hidden hatch in the floor, and the storage room sealed. It was a cryo-storage unit. The humans vented liquid nitrogen into the sealed room from 6 different pipes. The temperature dropped so fast that the Korvathi warriors' joints froze solid before they could cut through the walls. 15 elite warriors, each worth more than an entire army, died standing upright, locked in ice, their weapons still raised. In Sector 12, a lone Onyx Talon warrior chased 2 human soldiers down a narrow maintenance shaft. He was faster than them, he would catch them in seconds. But the shaft opened into a wide chamber, and the warrior found himself standing in front of a horizontal mining drill that had been bolted to the floor. A human engineer pressed the activation switch. The drill was designed to bore through solid rock. It went through Korvathi chitin even easier. These were not the tactics of a proper military. There were no formations, no grand strategies, no elegant maneuvers. This was something rawer and more dangerous. The humans were improvising. They were using their own base as a weapon, turning every room, every pipe, every piece of machinery into a way to kill. And they were not afraid to die doing it. Sergeant Mbue waited patiently in a control room deep beneath the base, watching his tactical display. He had spent 6 years building this network of tunnels and charges. Every explosive was placed with mathematical precision. Every detonation sequence was calculated to collapse exactly the right amount of rock in exactly the right direction. He watched the Korvathi push deeper into the tunnel network called the Warrens. An entire platoon of 40 Onyx Talon warriors moved through a wide main tunnel, advancing confidently. They thought the tunnel was a highway into the heart of the base. Mbue pressed the first detonation switch. The ceiling of the tunnel collapsed in a cascade of rock and ice, burying the entire platoon under 1,000,000 tons of frozen earth. The sound shook the entire base. Dust and ice crystals filled the air for minutes afterward. Kale, still commanding from the surface, felt 40 psionic signatures vanish from the lattice simultaneously. 40 minds gone in an instant. It was like losing 40 fingers at once. He staggered. He ordered a rescue team to dig them out. 20 warriors rushed to the collapse point and began clearing rubble with their enhanced strength. Mbue watched them arrive on his sensors. He waited until they were fully committed to the dig. Then he pressed the second switch. The second ring of charges detonated, collapsing the tunnel from both ends and above. The rescue team was buried alongside the soldiers they had come to save. 60 warriors gone, just like that. Mbue leaned back in his chair and allowed himself one small nod. By the 36th hour of the battle, the disruptions to the psionic lattice were becoming devastating. Dr. Ashcroft activated the scramblers in coordinated waves, timing them to coincide with Korvathi assault pushes. Each time the Onyx Talon launched a coordinated attack, their warriors moving as one mind, anticipating each other's movements, covering each other's blind spots. The scramblers would fire and the lattice would collapse. The effect was immediate and terrible. Warriors who had never fought as individuals suddenly found themselves alone inside their own heads. The shared awareness that had been with them since birth vanished. They could not feel their brothers beside them. They could not sense the enemy's position through another's eyes. They stumbled. They hesitated. They made mistakes. The humans did not hesitate. The humans did not stumble. They had always fought as individuals. They had always been alone inside their own heads, and they had learned, over thousands of years of war against each other, exactly how to exploit a moment of confusion. Colonel Voss fought on the front line when the Korvathi breached the section called the Foundry, the industrial heart of the base where power generators and manufacturing equipment were housed. A Korvathi warrior hit her with a plasma burst that burned across her entire left side, melting armor into skin and skin into muscle. Any reasonable person would have fallen. Any reasonable person would have screamed and waited for a medic. Voss did not fall. She did not scream. She picked up a shotgun from a dead soldier with her remaining good arm, braced herself against a wall, and held the choke point for 6 more hours. When she ran out of shotgun rounds, she used a welding torch. When the welding torch ran out of fuel, she used a metal pipe. She held the choke point until reinforcements arrived. When they found her, she was standing in a pile of Corvathi dead, still swinging. The medic who treated her said later that she should have died from shock alone within the first hour. Voss told him to save the painkillers for someone who needed them. By the 48th hour, Kale stood on the frozen surface and did something he had never done before. He counted his dead. 97 warriors. Gone. Nearly 40% of his deployed force, lost to a species that every analysis said should have been conquered in hours. He had fought civilizations with fleets of warships, with psionic armies, with technology that bent the laws of physics. None of them had cost him 97 warriors. These humans had no psionics, no natural armor, no claws, no venom. They had fragile bodies and short lives and absolutely no reason to believe they could win. And they were killing his soldiers at a rate that should have been impossible. Kale made a decision. He contacted the orbiting fleet and ordered the remaining 250 Onyx Talon warriors to deploy, all of them, the full force. Then he composed a message to the Dominion. He chose his words carefully. In 6,000 years of service, the Onyx Talon had never sent a message like this. These creatures do not fight like prey. They learn, they adapt, and they do not stop. Request advisement. He waited. The response came within the hour, stamped with the Archon's personal seal. There is no advisement. You are the Onyx Talon. You have never failed. Finish it. Kale read the message twice and closed the channel. He looked out across the ice fields of Acheron 7, scarred now with craters and stained with blood, both red and black. The blizzard howled around him. Somewhere deep beneath the ice he could feel the humans waiting, not hiding, not retreating, waiting, like they had planned for this too. The second wave of drop pods began their descent through the atmosphere, and the frozen moon shuddered as if it knew what was coming. On the 4th day, the humans stopped fighting like soldiers. They started fighting like wolves. Colonel Voss lay on a field stretcher deep in a buried communications bunker, her left side wrapped in burned dressings, an IV drip feeding her a cocktail of stimulants and painkillers that would have killed a smaller person. She could no longer walk. She could barely breathe without pain, but her mind was clear and her voice was steady when she activated the command channel. All units, this is Voss. New orders. We are abandoning the base. A pause on the channel, then her officers began acknowledging one by one. They did not question the order. They trusted her. We are done holding ground, Voss continued. From this moment there are no more defensive lines, no more walls, no more positions to defend. Break into cells, 3 to 5 per team. Go to ground in the caves, the ice canyons, the storm systems. Take only what you can carry, destroy everything else. She paused. The Wolvers will lead. Everyone else follows their example. We are not defenders anymore. We are hunters. She closed the channel and lay back on the stretcher. The medic beside her checked her vitals and said nothing. There was nothing to say. Within 6 hours, the remaining human forces, fewer than 600 soldiers out of the original 2,000, melted into the frozen wilderness of Acheron 7 like water into sand. They moved in small groups through tunnels the Corvathi had not mapped, through cave systems that did not appear on any scan, through cracks in the ice that were too narrow for a Corvathi warrior to follow. They carried rifles, knives, explosives, emergency rations, and the kind of cold determination that cannot be taught or engineered. Behind them they left the base. When the full Onyx Talon force, all 500 warriors, minus the 140 already dead, stormed the main complex, they found it empty. Not just empty, gutted. Every computer had been wiped. Every weapon locker was bare. Every piece of useful technology had been destroyed with thermite charges that burned so hot they melted through 3 floors. The power generators had been rigged to overload, flooding entire sections with radiation. The food stores were poisoned. The water recyclers were filled with acid. The Korvathi had won the base, and the base was worthless. Sireth Kale stood in the ruined command center and understood with a sickening clarity what the humans had done. They had never intended to hold this base. The base was a tool, nothing more. A way to bleed his forces, waste his time, and pull his entire army onto this frozen rock. Now that the tool had served its purpose, the humans had thrown it away and changed the rules of the game entirely. He had to hunt them across an entire moon, in their territory. The hunt began, and it went wrong immediately. The Onyx Talon were designed for conquest, shock assaults, overwhelming force, coordinated strikes against fixed positions. They were not designed for this. Acheron 7 was a nightmare of ice canyons, underground rivers, volcanic vents hidden beneath glaciers, and storms that reduced visibility to zero. The humans knew every inch of it. The Korvathi knew nothing. The first warriors disappeared on the second night of the hunt. A patrol of 8 entered an ice canyon to investigate a heat signature. 6 hours later, only their weapons were found, arranged in a neat line at the canyon entrance. The warriors themselves were gone. No bodies, no blood, no trace. 2 days later, a sentry posted at a supply depot vanished during a blizzard. His squad found him 12 hours later, a kilometer from his post. He was alive but stripped of every piece of armor and every weapon. He was naked on the ice, left to die of exposure. Carved into the ice beside him, in the Korvathi language, flawless, grammatically correct, were 2 words. "We see you." Kale read the report and felt that unfamiliar cold sensation again. The one he had first felt when the red flare went up. It was stronger now. The attacks escalated. A supply convoy moving between 2 forward positions was ambushed in a narrow ice gorge. The humans attacked from above, dropping from overhangs they had climbed in the dark. They attacked from below, bursting up through holes they had cut in the floor of the gorge. They attacked from within the snowdrifts themselves, soldiers who had buried themselves hours earlier and waited, motionless, in temperatures that should have killed them, for the convoy to pass directly overhead. The ambush lasted 4 minutes. 11 Korvathi warriors died. The humans took their weapons and disappeared into the storm before reinforcements could arrive. Captain Osa and her wolvers were the tip of this spear. They operated in teams of 3, moving through the cave networks like ghosts. They struck at night, during storms, in the moments between psionic scrambler pulses when the Korvathi were most disoriented. They never attacked the same way twice. They never struck where they were expected. They left signs, scratches on the ice, symbols painted in luminescent chemicals, recordings of human voices played from hidden speakers in empty tunnels. The signs said nothing important. They existed only to create fear. And it was working. The Onyx Talon warriors engineered to feel nothing, trained since birth to suppress every emotion that might interfere with combat effectiveness, began to come apart. Not all at once, not dramatically, but in small, terrible ways. They started clustering together instead of spreading out, seeking the comfort of numbers even though it made them easier targets. They began jumping at sounds, the crack of shifting ice, the howl of wind through a cave mouth, the distant echo of a human voice that might have been real or might have been a recording. They checked their flanks obsessively. They second-guessed their own senses. One warrior, a veteran of dozens of campaigns, broke down completely during a patrol. He claimed he could hear humans whispering inside the walls. He attacked his own squad, killing 2 before being restrained. When they pinned him down, he was screaming words that made no sense, fragments of human language he had picked up from the carved messages and the recordings. He kept repeating one phrase over and over. "They see us, they see us, they see us." The humans did see them. Every Korvathi patrol was watched. Every camp was observed. The humans had turned Acheron 7 into a web of hidden observation posts, sensor lines made from stripped-down mining equipment, and relay stations that allowed them to track every enemy movement across the moon's surface. They knew where the Korvathi were at all times. The Korvathi never knew where the humans were. On the 5th day, Sergeant Mbue gathered a team of 6 volunteers for a mission that everyone understood was probably one way. The target was Kale's Field Command ship, a heavy transport that had landed on the surface to serve as a mobile headquarters after the base was lost. It was the nerve center of the Korvathi operation. Destroying it would cripple their communications and logistics. The problem was reaching it. The ship was guarded by 50 Onyx Talon warriors and surrounded by open ice fields with no cover for half a kilometer in every direction. A surface storm was building, a bad one, with winds that would reach 200 kilometers per hour and temperatures that would drop to 80 below zero. No sane commander would order an attack in those conditions. Mbue was not interested in what sane commanders would do. His team walked into the storm, not around it, not waiting for it to pass. They walked directly into a weather system that should have killed every one of them in minutes. They wore modified thermal suits and carried chemical heat packs strapped to their bodies, but it was not enough. The cold was beyond anything the suits were designed for. Mbue lost feeling in his extremities within the first hour. They walked for 3 hours through the storm, navigating by compass and memory alone because every electronic device was useless in the interference. 2 of the 6 collapsed from hypothermia and had to be carried. They reached the command ship. The guards never saw them coming. In the storm, with visibility at 0, the Korvathi sentries had pulled back to the shelter of the ship's hull. Mbue's team planted charges on the ship's reactor housing, set a 90-second timer and ran. The explosion lit up the entire hemisphere of the moon. The command ship broke apart, its reactor going critical in a chain reaction that vaporized everything within a 300-meter radius and sent a shockwave across the ice fields that knocked down soldiers on both sides for kilometers. 3 of Mbue's team survived. Mbue himself lost his right arm to shrapnel. He sat in the snow, looked at the stump, pulled a plasma cutter from his belt and cauterized the wound himself. He did not scream. Then he picked up his rifle with his remaining hand, stood up, and began walking back toward friendly lines. Kale was not in the ship when it exploded. He had left minutes earlier to inspect a forward position. He stood on a ridge overlooking the burning wreckage of his headquarters and felt something he had never felt before, not in 30 conquered civilizations, not in 6,000 years of unbroken victory. He was afraid. He looked at the frozen wasteland around him and whispered into the wind, knowing no one could hear him. They were never prey. Somewhere in the ice canyons below, the wolvers were already moving, already planning their next attack. They did not rest. They did not slow down. They did not stop. They never stopped. Sireth Kale had 160 warriors left. He stood on the ice beneath a sky choked with ash and storm clouds, and he made the only decision he had left. No more hunting. No more patrols. No more slow bleeding across a frozen wasteland that seemed to eat his soldiers alive. He would gather every remaining Onyx Talon warrior and throw them at the humans in a single, overwhelming assault. It was the strategy of desperation. He knew it. His warriors knew it. But they were the Onyx Talon engineered for war, born for conquest, and if they were going to die on this miserable rock, they would die attacking. He activated what remained of the psionic lattice and reached out to every surviving mind. The connection was weak, damaged by the human scramblers and by something worse, a creeping psychological rot that had spread through the lattice like a virus. Fear, doubt, exhaustion, emotions the Onyx Talon had been designed never to feel. But Kale pushed through it with sheer force of will and sent a single command. All forces converge, final assault. Target the human command position. His intelligence teams had finally located where the human commander was hiding, a deeply buried communications bunker beneath a glacier on the moon's northern hemisphere. The bunker was small, hardened, and surrounded by a network of ice caves that the humans had turned into defensive positions. Getting there would mean crossing 5 kilometers of open ice shelf. Kale did not care. He had orbital support from his 2 remaining warships. He would bombard the surface, crack open the defenses, and send his warriors through the gap. It was crude, it was brutal, but it would work. Or so he believed. Deep beneath the glacier, Colonel Voss listened to the intelligence reports and understood what Kale was planning. She lay on her stretcher, her body broken, her breath coming in short, painful gasps. The medic had stopped pretending she was going to survive. Her organs were failing. The burns had become infected. She had maybe 12 hours left, probably less. She did not care about that. "He is bringing everything he has," she said to Captain Osai, who stood beside her with a rifle slung over her shoulder and ice in her hair. "All of them, across the northern shelf." Osai looked at the tactical display. "The shelf is mined." "The shelf is more than mined," Voss said. A ghost of a smile crossed her ruined face. "Get me the detonation codes for Protocol Pyrrhus." Osai stared at her. Everyone in the bunker stared at her. Protocol Pyrrhus was the final option, the one nobody had expected to actually use. Buried beneath the northern ice shelf, placed there during the original construction of the base 6 years ago, were a series of low-yield nuclear charges, not designed to destroy an army, designed to destroy geography. "The shelf will collapse," Osai said quietly. "Yes." "Into the subsurface ocean." "Yes." "With them on it." "That is the idea," Voss said. "But the timing has to be perfect. Too early and they pull back. Too late and they reach us. We need them fully committed, every single one of them standing on that ice when it breaks." She looked at Osai. "Position the Wolvers along the edges of the shelf, hidden. When the ice goes, anything that climbs out meets your people. Nothing gets through, nothing survives." Osai nodded once and disappeared into the tunnels. Voss closed her eyes and waited. The assault began 2 hours later. Kale's warships opened fire from orbit, sending columns of plasma down through the atmosphere that turned the surface of the glacier into a hellscape of steam and shattered ice. The bombardment lasted 30 minutes and carved a burning path straight to the bunker's estimated position. Then the Onyx Talon charged. 160 warriors crossed the ice shelf in a wedge formation, moving at full speed, their weapons firing ahead of them in a wall of energy that melted everything it touched. They were magnificent and terrifying, the greatest fighting force the galaxy had ever produced, unleashed without restraint, without hesitation, without mercy. Kale ran at the front. His armor was cracked. His body was wounded in 9 places. Black blood ran down his arms and froze on his blades. But he ran with the fury of a creature that had been humiliated, frightened, and broken, and wanted nothing more than to make someone pay for it. They crossed 1 kilometer, 2, 3. The ice trembled beneath their feet, but they did not slow down. 4 kilometers. Resistance was light, scattered rifle fire from hidden positions that the Corvathi overwhelmed without stopping. At 4.5 kilometers, with the full Onyx Talon force committed to the ice shelf and the bunker entrance visible ahead, Voss opened her eyes. "Now," she said. The nuclear charges detonated in sequence, each one a heartbeat after the last, running in a line beneath the ice shelf from east to west. The effect was not an explosion. It was a collapse. A 5-kilometer section of the ice shelf simply ceased to exist as a solid surface and fell in enormous, grinding chunks into the subsurface ocean below. The sound was like the moon itself was screaming. Over 100 Onyx Talon warriors plunged into black water so cold it stopped their hearts on contact. Their heavy armor, the chitin and cybernetics that made them so deadly on land, dragged them down like anchors. They thrashed and fought and tried to swim, but the water was thick and dark and crushingly cold, and the current pulled them under the remaining ice where there was no air and no light and no escape. Some managed to claw their way out. 20, maybe 30 warriors dragged themselves onto the broken edges of the shelf, gasping, freezing, their armor cracked and their weapons lost. They pulled themselves upright and looked around for their brothers. The Wolvers were waiting. They rose from their hiding positions along the shelf edge, snow-covered, silent, patient, and they fired. Not in rage, not in triumph. With the calm, steady precision of people completing a job they had trained their whole lives to do. Every warrior that crawled from the water was met with concentrated fire from multiple positions. The ones that got close enough to fight hand-to-hand met human soldiers who fought with knives, rifle butts, and bare hands if they had to. It was not a battle, it was a closing of jaws. Kale survived the collapse. He always survived. He pulled himself from the water through a crack in the ice, his body broken, his armor shattered, his psionic lattice completely dead. He could not feel a single other mind. For the first time in his existence, he was truly, completely alone. He fought his way across the shattered ice field. He killed 12 human soldiers who tried to stop him. Even now, even wounded beyond reason, he was still the most dangerous living thing on this moon. He found the entrance to the buried bunker. He broke through the blast door with his bare hands. He descended into the command center and found a single room, dimly lit, filled with broken equipment and the smell of blood and antiseptic. Colonel Voss sat upright on her stretcher, facing the door, as if she had been expecting him. A pistol lay across her lap. Her eyes were clear and steady, and she looked at Kale the way a person looks at a storm that has finally arrived. Kale stopped. He stood in the doorway, bleeding from wounds that would have killed any other creature hours ago. He looked at this small, broken, dying human and searched for something to say. Some final declaration of Korvathi superiority. Some last curse to throw at the species that had destroyed everything he was. He found only one question. "What are you?" Voss looked at him for a long moment. Then she spoke, and her voice was quiet but carried the weight of an entire species behind it. "We are the ones who looked at the dark between the stars and said, 'That is ours too.'" A shot echoed through the bunker, then silence. Weeks passed on Valithor Prime. The Onyx Talon did not return. Archon Zelith Vor waited. Then he stopped waiting and sent a reconnaissance fleet to the Acheron system. They arrived expecting to find a conquered world and a victorious army preparing for the journey home. They found a graveyard. The frozen moon was scarred with nuclear craters. The 5 black warships of the Onyx Talon fleet drifted dead in orbit, 3 of them torn apart by railgun fire from hidden orbital platforms that the humans had activated after the ground battle began. The other 2 were cold and empty, their crews dead at their posts from boarding actions that had happened while Kale fought below. On the surface, the reconnaissance teams found bodies, hundreds of them human and Korvathi alike, frozen together in the ice, locked in death the way they had been locked in battle. Every Onyx Talon warrior was accounted for. All 500 were dead. The greatest fighting force in the history of the galaxy, undefeated for 6,000 years, had been wiped out entirely by a garrison on a frozen moon. Not a fleet, not an army, a garrison. But the discovery that silenced the reconnaissance team, that made the fleet commander sit down heavily in his chair and stare at nothing for a very long time, was found at the center of the ruined human base. Carved into a titanium bulkhead with a plasma cutter, in perfect Korvathi script, were words that would eventually reach the Archon's own throne room. "You sent your best. We sent a garrison. Ask yourselves what happens when we send ours." Ambassador Ireli was summoned to the Hall of Subjugation for the second time. The hall was quiet. No one was laughing. No one was arguing. The 400 banners of conquered civilizations hung from the ceiling, and for the first time in 12,000 years, they felt less like trophies and more like warnings. Ireli stood before the council and projected a single image, a star map of human-controlled space. Since the Onyx Talon had deployed, it had doubled in size. The humans had not been sitting idle. While the Dominion's attention was fixed on Acheron 7, humanity had expanded in every direction, absorbing territory, building fleets, fortifying borders. Ireli said nothing. The map said everything. Archon Zelith Vor sat on his throne and stared at the display. His four eyes moved slowly across the spreading blue territory that marked human space. He did not speak. For the first time in his long reign, the supreme ruler of the Korvathi Dominion had nothing to say. Far from Valithor Prime, far from the politics and the fear and the silence of empires, Colonel Marin Voss sat in a bed in a military hospital on a green and quiet world. She had lost a leg. Her left side was a landscape of scar tissue. The doctors said it was a miracle she was alive at all. She did not feel like a miracle. She felt tired. She sat by the window and watched the stars come out, one by one, over a sky that had never known war. A young officer approached her, nervous, holding a data tablet. "Colonel, the intelligence report you requested. The Korvathi Dominion has gone silent. No fleet movements, no communications, no aggression of any kind along any border." Voss took the tablet and read it slowly. She set it down on the table beside her bed. "They will be back," she said. Her voice was calm and certain. "They always come back. Every empire that ever looked at something it did not understand and decided to be afraid of it, they always come back eventually, with bigger ships and more soldiers and new reasons to convince themselves they will win this time." She looked at the young officer. "Make sure we are ready." The officer saluted and left. Voss turned back to the window. The stars burned cold and bright and endless above her, and she watched them the way a soldier watches a horizon, not with wonder, but with patience. Somewhere out there, empires were learning a lesson that humanity had known since before it left its own world. The universe does not belong to the strongest or the fastest or the most ancient. It belongs to the ones who refuse to stop.